I'm very excited to welcome Eileen Beltzner, our speaker for today. And Eileen was originally trained as a special care counselor, is a registered social worker, child and family therapist, and psychotherapist. She is also a senior faculty member at the Center for Mindfulness Studies in Toronto, and is also the author of How to Tame the Tumbles, the Mindful Self-Compassionate Way, which teaches child-size MSC concepts and practices in story form to parents and children. So with that introduction, I'm very excited to have her lead today's part 2 series of mindfulness, the Mindfulness Be Well talk, and I will pass it over to you, Eileen.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here, and I'm going to begin our webinar with something we call a soft landing practice, and that's very similar to when you might be in a plane one day, maybe not for now, and the plane just comes in really softly to your destination. So this is going to be a brief 3 to 5 minute practice, and it's to acknowledge our virtual presence in this room together today. And it's to bring our minds and also our hearts into the room. So I invite you to get into any position that is most comfortable for you this afternoon. And having a downward gaze, or closing your eyes fully or partially, whichever is best for you to go a little inward. And let's begin by simply listening to the sounds in the space you're in. Not needing to strain to hear them or to name them, just letting them come to you, and then moving on to whatever sound may come next, if any. We're all just sitting here in the midst of sound. And now I invite you to drop your awareness into your body and feeling any sensations which may be present right now. If there are any pleasant sensations, perhaps taking a moment to appreciate and savor them. And if there are unpleasant sensations in your body, so can you make a little room, little space for them, just allowing them to be there, if only for this moment. And remembering that you're not alone, that uneasiness and discomfort is part of our human condition. And of course, if there is discomfort, can you let your heart soften just a little, be a little tender, just because this is so. And perhaps you may want to offer yourself some words of encouragement, like it's okay. You can handle this. And finally, just welcoming yourself with an inner smile if that feels right for you. And just some appreciation for yourself, for all the effort and good intentions that brought you here today. And when you're ready, slowly and gently opening your eyes if they were closed. Thank you. So I said I'm delighted to be here. I'm honored to be here and be part of Wellspring. Cancer has touched the lives of so many of us. Such a diagnosis, the variety of treatments, and all the outcomes really allow us to get up close and personal with the experiences of suffering. Tell you a little bit more about myself. I'm a trained facilitator of mindful-based cognitive therapy, as well as my dear friend Dr. Allison Kelford is. My heart and energies, though, were eventually stolen away from mindful-based cognitive therapy to become a mindful self-compassion teacher. Last week on the Be Well Wednesday webinar, Allison did an amazing job presenting an introduction to mindfulness. And today, I'm going to be presenting a brief introduction to mindful self-compassion. So why were my energies stolen and my heart was stolen? My husband and I attended an MSc training program, one of the first of its kind being offered in the world. And the developers of the Mindful Self-Compassion training program, Dr. Kristen Neff and Dr. Christopher Germer, they were the one teaching that program. And that was in 2012. I didn't sign up for professional reasons because I wanted to become or learn more about mindful self-compassion. The reasons that my husband and I signed up were reasons of pain and suffering, actually. And we both sought out the training when it did come available to learn how to offer what we had learned to others, because it had impacted our life so very much. So since 2014, I've been teaching mindful self-compassion training with my husband, and I eventually followed all the requirements to become a certified mindful self-compassion teacher. And the training course is actually 28 to 30 hours. And today I have probably 40 minutes, maybe 45 minutes. And I know there's going to be some questions as well, I hope, to give you a brief introduction into MSC. So, next slide. Before I go on to these slides, I just want you to know there's so much research now that has been done on the benefits of mindful self-compassion, and it's powerfully linked to well-being. It's strongly associated with fewer negative states like depression, anxiety, stress, and shame, also negative body image. It's also strongly linked to positive states like happiness, life satisfaction, and optimism. More importantly, it's a skill that can be learned by anyone. So I've put here two definitions, which you are probably familiar with. And I know that there are a lot of people who may be listening today who are very familiar with mindful self-compassion and with mindfulness. But I also know in classes I teach, there are some people who don't know anything about either of them. So bear with me as I talk to you about a few things. So if you notice here, compassion may be defined as a sensitivity to the pain or suffering of another, coupled with a deep desire to alleviate that suffering. So a number of years ago, one of my children had cancer. And I really didn't think too much at the time that I needed anything at all. I just had a deep desire to alleviate any pain. she's doing very, very well now. She's very, very healthy. All things are good. I asked her if I could mention this, and she said, you know, Mom, you can mention anything you like if it's helpful to people or to you. So that's why I'm mentioning it. And the reason I'm also mentioning it is because if you look what self-compassion is, it's simply compassion directed toward oneself, inner compassion. And generally when someone you love is ill, or just generally in life, this is not something we often think about, that we too need compassion. So Kristen Neff, just getting down to the bottom here of my screen, her definition of self-compassion is in challenging times, treating yourself as you would a good friend. So that was something I really learned how to do. My husband and I learned how to do through our training and all the practice we did over the last few years. Now, the three components of mindful self-compassion scale. The scale is something that is on Kristen Neff's website, and it measures the amount of self-kindness a person has versus self-judgment, the amount of common humanity they have versus isolation, and the amount of mindfulness that's present. This is a research scale, mindfulness versus over-identification. So balanced awareness, perhaps some of you know that as equanimity, but balanced awareness. Now, just moving on here, I'll just talk a little bit what these words mean. You can actually go on this scale and measure your own level of self-compassion after this program, if you have such a desire to do so. So self-kindness versus self-judgment, that's treating ourselves with kindness, care and understanding and support, just as we would a good friend. Most of us, as I mentioned, don't treat ourselves quite like that. In fact, when we make a mistake or we fail, or we mess up in some way or whatever, we're often very harsh with ourselves. So basically, self-kindness is treating ourselves without judging ourselves, and just as we might a good friend. In the program my husband and I teach, we do an exercise called How Would You Treat a Friend? And that really shows, it's a paper and pencil exercise, and the folks in the audiences are amazed to find out how very kind they are to their friends when they mess up or something's not going well in their friend's life. However, when they write down what they would say to themselves, they usually start laughing. And they're not laughing because it's lovely what they're writing down. They're usually laughing because they're pretty harsh. They would never speak to a friend like that, or they might not have any friends left. So compassion includes a wish and an effort to alleviate suffering. There's an action component to the self-kindness as well, the compassion. Now, moving on to common humanity and versus isolation. This is a very important part. I remembered when my daughter was ill. I'll put it in just a human form. I felt pretty alone at the time, and there was people. It was almost they just didn't want to hear much about anything, or when they phoned, they'd tell me all the people that got well. And most often it had nothing to do with the type of cancer my daughter had. And I remember I would feel so isolated and alone with that, and also pretty irritated. I didn't want to say anything to them because I know they were just trying to be helpful, but at the same time, it wasn't helpful. Now, the part where mindful self-compassion, we're going to be doing a mindful self-compassion break later in this webinar, but there was a part in the mindful self-compassion break where we go, I'm not alone. And I remember the words that came to me, I was looking up the sky and I just said, wow, I'm not alone. There's so many other mothers who are going through this too. And it just made me feel just so much more connected to what was going on and to other people. So that's the common humanity versus the isolation. And then mindfulness versus over-identification. That's being aware that I am suffering, I'm going through a difficult time, but at the same time, it's imbalanced awareness. It's not the worst thing in the entire universe. It's not the worst thing in the world. It's having more of a balanced awareness. And that's a third part. In the last few years, Kristen Neff has also introduced the yin and yang of compassion. And she's done that because a lot of people think being kind to yourself is really just a form of, self-pity, or giving yourself, that, you're weak or selfish, or you're being self-indulgent. Also, if you're kind to yourself when you mess up, how are you ever going to end up being able to motivate yourself? Well, the fact of the matter is, she's identified the yin and the yang of compassion. The yin is more the softer side, and that's where you say, this is hard, what do I need right now? But the yang is more a protective side. It's where you say, come on, you can do it, Eileen. Or, or when you see injustice, you're able to take a stand, and you don't say, that person did that. You go, no, it's not okay. You say, stop. You stop. It's not okay. So I'm going to move on from there. I'm watching my time. Now that I've said all of that, mindfulness part, thanks to Allison, she introduced you noticing perhaps different sensations in your body, or going to your breathing. It's all in a purpose of beginning to know what is going on inside our body. Many times I've found myself, or the clients I've worked with in the last 40 some years, maybe more, we have a tendency, we cut our feelings off right at the neck. And we often wonder why sometimes we get a tightness in our throat or tightness in our shoulders. But the fact of the matter is, we have, as Allison mentioned, we have a mind brain, we have a heart brain, and we have a gut brain. Our body is completely connected to all of us, our whole body. So we need to know what's happening mindfully in our bodies. And we need to know that with mindful self-compassion, so at the time we can give ourselves kindness and care when we are suffering. Now, I also want to add, a lot of the students in our class take offense at the word of suffering. If that's a problem, the word suffering for you, because it's just too big, it means all the suffering that's going on in the world, well then I just suggest you use the small s suffering. Whatever it is you need to do, don't let a word bother you. Try to find out what it is you're feeling inside when something hurts. So you need to then respond with the compassion. I've mentioned what self-kindness is, and I've mentioned common humanity. Yes, there are actually over 7 billion of us. And one of the things that helped me so much, as I mentioned, when I looked up at the sky and said, I'm not the only mother, it was that, there are millions of mothers. And I'm not going to leave out my husband and fathers, who are also going through this too, and we're not alone. So I'm going to move. I don't know why I'm moving my mouse. I should leave it where it is. There you go. All right, perhaps some of you are familiar with the fact that when we criticize ourselves, when we give us a hard time, we're actually, that's an actual stress response turned inward. So we fight with ourselves. The stress response is fight, flight, and freeze, which are which come up when your amygdala, there's two, one on either side of your brain, are activated. Basically, your parasympathetic nervous system is turned off when you're in stress response. And so if you look at the corresponding responses with stress turned inward, when we are harsh to ourselves, we fight with ourselves, we are basically doing self-criticism, and the anecdote to that particular piece is self-kindness. Now, the flight is when I was perhaps in freeze and went to the Gervancy Center, et cetera, et cetera. I was really wanting to run away, and there was a tendency. I went into the bathroom, locked myself in there a little bit, and I kind of isolated myself. And that again is the stress response turned inward. But then the part where I started to know that there was common humanity and I wasn't alone, and I was able to talk with the nurses and talk with other people and get the different kinds of support to be the person I needed to be for my child. That was so much better. And as for freezing, that's probably familiar to so many of us. When I don't know how many people over the last many months, or just when a diagnosis comes up of any kind, you start having what we call rumination. Is basically thoughts, the same thoughts that go on in your head over and over and over again. And you're in freeze mode then. Freeze mode is often associated with low mood, with depression. And we have ruminating thoughts. We don't know where to go and what to do. And we keep trying to find an answer, and it's the same thing that's going on over and over again. And basically what we're doing is we are putting ourselves and continuing to put ourselves, not on purpose, but we're in stress mode. So your amygdalas are triggered and you are in stress mode. And I don't know about any of you, but when I'm in stress mode, I don't think I'm thinking very clearly. So the anecdote to that, if you notice, when I notice I'm in rumination, I just say, Eileen, I've learned to do this. Eileen, how is the moment right in this minute? Or I breathe. For me, I can access my breathing. And I just take a few easy breaths, pay attention to my breathing. And I may also obviously, I use a self-compassion break, which we are going to be doing. Now, according to Dr. Paul Gilbert, I'm just going to give you a bit of science on this. When we criticize ourselves, I have said this, we're tapping into our body's threat system. This threat system helps us very much to protect ourselves from dangers out in the world, but most of us don't have that many dangers out in the world in the past. I know that unfortunately we are in a pandemic right now. I was thinking about that when I was presenting or thinking about this presentation. But in general, there are things that we can do to keep ourselves as safe as possible. So one of the things when our amygdalas get triggered, we don't just run, we have the ability to think, and we also are not reptiles, we're mammals. And in the self-compassion program, we use the mammalian care response. Now, putting it in some basic terms, you probably do it all the time. If you have a pet, or if you have a loved one, a dear one, it could be a child, it could be a spouse, it could be a partner, it could be a friend, and they're upset. Generally, what we do in times when we're not in a pandemic is we may put our hand on their shoulder, we may give them a hug. So we've got that warmth and touch, and we may say, you know what, you're going to be all right. With a pet, my dogs, for instance, they're very frightened of thunder and lightning. when they start to cry, and I basically will do exactly, they're mammals, their mammalian response. I give them a human touch. I just say, there, you're going to be okay. And then what I do is I comfort them. So in this particular program, one of the things that we talk to our students about is when we do this, we actually bring forward a chemical in our bodies called oxytocin. And that is a love chemical. And one of the ways one can really access it very well, I'll get to the other piece in a moment, is just even putting your hand at the back of your neck underneath, if you're able to do that, if that's something that's available to you, and just rubbing just under your skull area, just gently, not gouging or anything, just gently feeling the back of your neck, and just noticing what that feels like for you. Yeah. And that is one of the areas that can have a big burst of oxytocin. So I've been told by some of the researchers, like scientists I know. So we're going to be practicing some physical gestures that are part of the self-compassion break that we are going to be doing in a few minutes. I'm going to move this slide forward. Okay, we've come to soothing touch, supportive touch, comforting gesture. I've come up with 3 words simply because some people don't like the word soothing, it bothers them. I like supportive touch, I like soothing touch. My friend in Australia, her husband calls it a comforting gesture. They're teachers in Australia, and they came up with that, so I put that down. So you'll notice that I have here cats and dogs and people, and I have that because it's been my experience teaching that some people are not comfortable offering themselves a soothing touch, and that may be hand on arm. I'll take you through a few soothing touches in one moment. Or but they just don't like it, or they just don't know what that feels like, perhaps because it's not something that they've ever had access to, or sadly to say, it's not something they've ever experienced. And so in that case, I'll say to them, have you got a warm fuzzy blanket? Just to begin to start to feel just that, what that might feel like, a touch. Or a lot of people will pat their cat or their dogs if they have them. They just sit with them and listen to their little animals breathing, and that somehow can be very soothing before you go into the more offering yourself that kind of a gesture. So as I said, this is the way we give ourselves physical compassion, and finding the physical touch that is uniquely comforting to each of us is very, very important. Because when we find that touch, we can then also have some soothing vocalization, some words we might be able to say to ourselves too. So it's very interesting and unusual not to see people's faces when I teach. I hope that my pace is okay. I really do want to move forward and have you go through these practices. But what you need to know, if you don't feel like doing the practices today, in a few seconds, or actually in a few moments, I will direct you to a link where you can actually listen to those. You don't have to pay. It's my Podbean link, and you can listen to me going through the soothing touch practice and also the mindful self-compassion break. Rainer and I have developed that for our students because this is something we have to practice to learn how to do. when we're having difficulty, or when we're suffering, or when we're hurting. And of course, what we don't do is we don't practice right away when we are having the most difficult situation coming up. We practice with little small bits, just little bits. That's what we do. So I've explained that touch is the key signal of compassion to all mammals. And now I'm going to invite you to, if you're comfortable, close your eyes, or just have a downward gaze. If you'd like to stand up, please feel free to do that if you have that available to you. I just ask you to put notice first, just going into your body, noticing what's present. I know Allison talked about perhaps directing your attention down to the soles of your feet, feeling the soles of your feet, wiggling your toes perhaps, just to say hi there. I'm now in my body. Okay, just grounding ourselves. It helps to ground. I'm going to ask you with each gesture just to notice what your experience is with it. So just gently putting two hands together. See what comes up for you, if anything. Now holding one palm in the other. I don't know if you can. Okay, just holding one palm in the other. One hand in the other. And we're putting one hand over the heart, and perhaps the other hand on top of it. Just notice. And now cupping one hand over a fist that's on your heart. Just notice, just noticing what comes up, if anything. And now one hand on the heart and one hand on our belly. And perhaps trying two hands on the belly. One hand on your cheek, noticing what that feels like for you. And the other hand on your cheek, just cradling your face. And one of the students found putting her hand on her forehead was very soothing. She said it reminded her when her parent used to check her head to see if she had a fever. And then lastly, just one hand at the back of your neck. And yeah, and cupping both your hands in your lap. And please remember the soothing touch that, or comforting touch or supportive touch that you may have discovered today, it doesn't always stay the same. It may change depending on just how you're feeling. So, you know, and I have to say, one thing about self-compassion, we don't give it to ourselves because we're trying to get rid of the way we're feeling. We give it to ourselves because we're hurting in some way. We're suffering. And the best analogy I could use is, one we often use is when you're looking after a child who has the flu, you're not kind and caring for that child to rid the body of the flu. You're offering your care and kindness to that person because you care about them and because they're suffering. So now, I notice we're at 20 to 1. I'm going to take you through a mindful self-compassion break. And it's extremely important that you follow my guidelines when we do this self-compassion break. And when I say that, because I'm going to invite you to close your eyes partially or fully for this, and I'm going to invite you to think about a situation in your life that is a little difficult and is causing you perhaps some stress right now, but you need to choose a problem that's in the mild to moderate range, not a big problem. Because we don't want to overwhelm ourselves the moment we're learning the skill of self-compassion. However, that being said, sometimes what happens is you may think of something and something big comes up. And there's a sense of overwhelm, or you feel overwhelmed or really upset. That is the time we do something that we call, you need to close. You need to do the self-compassionate act, a behavioral act of looking after yourself, and you need to stop doing the practice. You can open your eyes, you know, you can go and get a glass of water. Remember, you can do this on the Podbean site that is there another time, all right? So that's very, very important. You need to take care of yourself. So again, I'm going to begin. So please closing your eyes or have a downward gaze. And the situation that's difficult could be a work problem. Perhaps someone disrespected you. They may have done that because of your age, your ability, or another identity that you have. And allow yourself to see, hear, and feel your way into the problem to the extent that your experience is a little bit of uneasiness in your body. Where do you feel it the most? inviting you to make contact with this discomfort you may be feeling in your body. And now saying, this is a moment of suffering. This is mindfulness. Other options include, this hurts. This is hard. Doesn't feel good. And now I invite you to say to yourself very clearly, suffering is part of life, part of living. Suffering is part of life. It's part of living. It's common humanity. You may also want to say something that fits better, like I'm not alone. Me too. There are other people in my community who would feel just like this in my situation. And now I invite you to put your hands over your heart or wherever you found today that feeling gesture, supportive gesture, comforting gesture. For me, it is 2 hands on my heart. And just say to yourself, if it feels right, may I be kind to myself. May I give myself what I need. That's self-kindness. Perhaps asking yourself what quality of self-compassion you need right now. Yin or yang. Yin language might be, may I accept myself just as I am? Or may I care for myself tenderly in this moment? Yang language might be, no, I will not allow myself to be harmed in this way. Or may I have the strength and courage to make a change? And if you're having difficulty finding the right words, imagine what you would say to a good friend, a loved one, someone who's having the same problem as you. What would you say to this person, heart to heart, without giving advice? And if your friend were to hold just a few of your words in her mind, what would you like them to be? What message would you like to deliver? And now, can you offer the same words to yourself? Slowly opening your eyes. These are the connections to the recorded versions of both the practices I just did. You can just cut and paste into your browser once this is recorded. And I just put this up here to end, simply to say, these are all what we call mindfulness practices: brushing our teeth, eating, practicing, washing our hands, and paying attention. But they're also mindful self-compassion practices. When we take care of ourselves, that's a compassionate act. We go for a walk, we look after our teeth, we eat well, we eat healthy food. That little gnome down there, we go out and we enjoy nature. And we practice short meditations of self-compassion. And I'm going to leave, I have, it looks like 1 minute. I was trying to decide which poem. We use a lot of poetry as well in mindful self-compassion. There's one I really like, the Banach by John O'Donoghue. But I'm not going to read that one. Perhaps you'd like to look it up one day. It's The Blessing. I'm going to read this one. It's Wild Geese, and it's by the late Mary Oliver. And perhaps you know of it. Many, many people do. And it actually contains all 3 parts that we went through: self-kindness, common humanity, and mindfulness. And it's called Wild Geese. You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Tell me about your despair, yours, and I will tell you mine. Meanwhile, the world goes on. Meanwhile, the sun and the clear pebbles of the rain are moving across the landscapes, over the prairies and the deep trees, the mountains and the rivers. Meanwhile, the wild geese, high in the clear blue air, are heading home again. Whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination, calls to you like the wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over, announcing your place in the family of things. Thank you so much for that, Mary Oliver. I love her poetry, and thank you so much for having me here to do this webinar.
Thank you so much, Eileen. That was such a wonderful presentation. And I know that everyone joining us today definitely found that to be very, very helpful. And so now we will move on to our question period. And I just wanted to read the first question. Would you mind posting again the links of the 2 exercises and also the name of the poet and poem you couldn't read today, as well as the one you did read?
Posting it. Yeah, so I
think how we can do this is if you can send me, after the presentation,
Yes.
in an email, if you could send me the links of the 2 exercises and the name of the 2 poems and poet that you mentioned, I can send that out to people who were registered today.
And you did see that both links were actually right on a PowerPoint slide.
Yes, and unfortunately, because we're not sending the PowerPoint out, when they see the recording, it'll just be a video, so they won't be able to click on the video, the link embedded in the video.
Oh, so they can't even cut and paste it, eh?
No, unfortunately not.
Oh,
so if you
I will
can send
definitely
that to
do
me,
that. And
awesome.
yes, wild geese and Banach. I will definitely, a blessing. Definitely send those to you.
Wonderful, and I will send that out to everyone today. And our next question, I think there was just a question to, if you could clarify or just expand a little bit. I believe it was a mammalian care response.
We're all mammals, and we elicit soothing touch. It's through touch. We can comfort our parasympathetic nervous system through touch and gentle vocalization. That's what I mean.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And when we do that, when we speak softly to ourselves inside our head, say kind words, and use gentle, warm touch, we're actually telling our parasympathetic nervous system that we're okay, and it calms it. It's like we calm a little child, a baby that's crying. The mother or father will pick up that child, soft words, hold close, and hold an arm. I hope that helps.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. And so our next question, where do you find the self-compassion scale questionnaire?
The scale is on Kristen Neff's website, and msc.org. Kristen Neff, just Google Kristin Neff, Neff, and you do the check marks, and it even gives you your score. When we used to teach this course, we have all our students take the before scale and then the after scale, and then we duplicated exactly the same research that Kristen did. In most cases, I think in all cases, the self-compassion went up for the people, but then it got a little bit too much work, because we've had quite a few hundred students, and it's a lot of forms for us to be filling in. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you. And our next question, we have another one. Can you recommend any specific programs like this geared towards couples?
We have seen many couples take the Mindful Self-Compassion training course. The course is offered, right now it's being offered online. It's offered in person. I'm on the faculty at the Center for Mindfulness Studies in Toronto. And if people go there, they will see the training that's offered, Mindful Self-Compassion training. There is a course that may be offered through the University of San Diego, Mindful Self-Compassion for couples. I'm not sure that it's online, but again, my experience is the couples who have taken the courses with my husband and I have found it very, very helpful. I mean, it's not something you need to take with Rainer and myself. There are many other fine MSc teachers out there. But my recommendation is that's a good place to start. What we do, though, when a couple comes in, is we ask them to not sit beside each other and not to get into all the small groups that we have. We do a lot of small group work in MSc as well. And that's because we want people to be able to speak freely. You know, we're not necessarily always as comfortable speaking in front of our partner as we could be if we weren't. I'll just say that.
Thank you for that. So another one of our questions, I think an add-on to that question, can couples do online courses? Are there any online mindfulness?
We're doing one. Rainer and I are actually doing one starting on September 27th. And it's going to be on Sunday afternoons, and it's online. And if they want to find out about it, you can go to the Center for Mindfulness Studies.
Okay, the Center for Mindfulness Studies.
Yeah, starting September 27th, but we're starting the interviewing on the 21st. Everyone who comes to our groups, we have to interview the person to make sure that it's a good fit for them. If it isn't a good fit at this time, we would refer them to another program, because it can be emotionally activating. But we do also teach many, many ways for people to stay in what we call their window of tolerance or their zone of safety. So please look it up at the Center for Mindfulness Studies in Toronto. Yep.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And so it looks like we've got another question. Last week I asked Dr. Calford about a course for preteens or teens to help them with reactive behaviors. And she mentioned that you would have the right kind of courses tailored for this. So if anybody is interested in reaching out to you or contacting you for or any information about this course, is there a website or email address or best method of contact?
Yeah, at the bottom of the PowerPoints, there's it's mindful excuse me, I've got so many mindfulness things going on here. It's selfcompassionsolutions.com. That's
Okay.
my website. And if they were to go to Eventbrite, that's advertising a course that I'm going to be teaching for 11 to 13-year-olds. The course is an adapted version of the MSc program. It's called Making Friends with Yourself. And I've taught a couple of online courses this summer with my colleague. Her name is Macy Ratcliffe, and she is actually a very, very well experienced teacher from down in the United States. What's kind of cool right now is we've had people come from all over the world to the course, and the kids really have an opportunity to find out what other children are like. That common humanity, they find out they're probably quite a bit alike. So does that help? Have I answered that question, or have I just said too many directions of where to go?
Yes, yes, you did. And I've also put it in the chat at selfcompassionsolutions.com. So if anyone is interested.
I have a question for you. Uh, what if I sent you a resource list?
Yeah, that would be super helpful, and I
Give
can send that
talks.
out.
I mean, my last talk was just before the pandemic happened. It was at Humberside Collegiate, and it was about a 2.5-hour workshop for parents and teenagers. It was something that the school had asked me to do, and I put together a big resource section. So I'd be glad to send that out.
That would be great.
Okay, fantastic.
And I can send that out after, and then so
Fantastic.
that just gives people a couple of things all in one document that they can look for more information.
Thank
So
you.
I think that, unfortunately, it looks like that's all the time we have for today. It is 1 o'clock. So Eileen, I just wanted to say thank you so much for today's presentation, all the information you did share, the resources you are to provide as well. And I know everyone joining us today very much did so. Appreciate everything that you shared. And I just wanted to thank you for presenting and everyone who was able to join in today's talk as well.
Thank you. Wonderful being here.
Alrighty, so it looks like with that, we will wrap up today's session. And for those of you who are interested, you can find the recording afterwards in the next week or so, hopefully, once we get that edited on our website as well. And I will be sending out the resource list when I have it as well. So thank you very much. And I hope everyone enjoys the rest of their day. Thank you again.
All right. Bye-bye.